It started with a casserole and a concerned smile. That's how betrayals like this always start. Disguised as kindness, wrapped in foil, left on your porch like a favor. "Just rest, Mom," my daughter Amelia said as she handed me the still warm pan. "You've done enough. We've got it from here." She kissed my cheek, smiled wide, and promised they'd stop by soon. Then she closed the door and I stood there holding that casserole like it was a ticking clock. 2 days later, they drove me out of my home. "It's temporary," she'd said. "Just while we get the house cleaned and safe," her husband Tim added. "We'll make sure you're comfortable." Comfortable. That word should have been my first clue. Comfortable is what you say when you're smoothing over a lie. Comfortable is what you say before you push someone into silence. They called it Golden Crest Assisted Living, but it looked more like a waiting room for the forgotten. Beige walls, plastic plants, cheap laminate floors that echoed every footstep like a warning. I didn't even get to pack my own suitcase. Amelia had already done it for me. 2 blouses, my nightgown, and one framed photo of my late husband, Alan. None of my books. None of my letters. None of the things that made a room feel like mine. The nurse at the front desk handed me a laminated name tag and said, "Welcome, Miss Ruth. You're in room 2B, just until your family gets things sorted out." I smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile women my age learn to wear when we're being buried alive politely. Room 2B had twin beds, one roommate who snored like a chainsaw, and a bathroom with a toilet that groaned louder than the floorboards. The window faced a brick wall. I sat on the bed, folded my hands in my lap, and thought about how strange it was to be alive and still feel like I'd disappeared. By day 3, no one visited. No calls, no check-ins. Just daily texts from Amelia. "Hey, Mom. Everything's good. Hope you're getting some sleep." I replied with one word. "Thanks." Because if I'd said what I really felt, it would have broken her screen. On the 4th night, I woke up to the sound of my roommate crying in her sleep. A soft, haunted sound. I didn't ask questions. I just reached across the dark and held her hand. Sometimes silence is more honest than comfort. By the 5th day, I knew the routine. Breakfast at 7 o'clock, activities at 10 o'clock, bland conversation by noon, dinner by 5 o'clock. Lights out by 8 o'clock, whether you're ready or not. I watched women once brilliant now being spoken to like toddlers. I watched staff shuffle us from room to room like we were inventory. I watched myself becoming one of them. Until something happened that changed everything. It was bingo night. Not because I wanted to play, but because the other option was sitting alone in the common room watching an infomercial about copper pans. I sat in the corner. And that's when I overheard the staff whispering. "She's the new one. Ruth something. Daughter dropped her off like a package. Another one they're hoping forgets she owns a house." I turned slowly and smiled the same way I had when Amelia handed me that casserole. Because in that moment, I realized something very important. They weren't hiding the truth because I was old. They were hiding it because they thought I was done. And that was their biggest mistake. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up making lists in my head. Contacts, lawyers, bankers, and a name I hadn't spoken aloud in 20 years, Monica Ellis, my old roommate from college, now the CEO of a real estate trust. The same woman who once told me, "If you ever want back in the game, call me." I had just never imagined back in the game would mean buying the place they left me in. On day 6, I asked the front desk for their property manager's name. "Why?" the nurse asked. "Just curious," I smiled. "I may want to complain about the food." But I didn't call to complain. I called Monica. "Golden Crest?" she said, amused. "Ruth, that place is one good inspection away from condemnation." "Good," I said, "because I want it." "You want to live there?" "No," I said. "I want to own it." Monica laughed like I'd just told her I wanted to run for mayor. Then she paused and said, "You're serious?" "I have cash, I have time, and I have absolutely nothing left to lose." She didn't ask more questions, just said, "I'll pull the deeds and get my broker on it." And just like that, the woman they parked like a car in an empty lot was behind the wheel again. The morning of the inspection, I asked the nurse for a copy of the weekly meal schedule. She looked confused. Are you planning to file a complaint? No, I said with a polite smile. I'm just comparing standards. She handed it over with a shrug. She didn't know I was documenting everything. Photos of peeling linoleum, notes about late medication rounds, a video of the recreation director sleeping in the middle of bingo night. I was building a case, not just for ownership, but for transformation. Monica worked fast. By the second day, she had a contact at the city who confirmed the property was overdue for major upgrades. Plumbing, electrical, fire compliance. The owners are a shell group that's been trying to sell for years, she told me, but no one wants the liability. I leaned back in the wobbly chair in my room. Perfect, Nadia said, because I'm not just anyone. That same afternoon, I called my late husband's lawyer. He still remembered me, Judith Ruth Taylor, the woman who hand-wrote her husband's eulogy and organized the estate files by color-coded binder. I asked him one question. How much liquid cash do I have access to? After a few minutes of rustling paper and tapping keys, he said, about $860,000, if you're ready to move some of your safer bonds. I smiled. Move them. That night, I wandered down the hall under the excuse of stretching my legs. But I wasn't looking for exercise. I was looking for room 3D. That was the door I'd seen closed every day, never opened, never cleaned, no nameplate. Even the staff avoided it. I pressed my ear to the door, nothing. Then I jiggled the handle. Unlocked. Inside was a time capsule, a nurse's station, dusty and unused, medical files stacked high, old medicine bottles, a cot folded in the corner. It wasn't a residence room, it was an overflow room, an emergency holding space. It hadn't been registered on the official map, which meant no inspection, no maintenance. And if I hadn't found it, no one would have ever cleaned it out. I took a photo because this was leverage. The next day, I asked to speak with the facility administrator. She was a 30-something woman named Jenna who smiled like a barista, trying to hide bad news about your latte. Is everything okay, Ruth? She asked. Oh, yes, I said. I just wanted to confirm a few details for my records. Records? Yes, I smiled wider. I'm in the process of acquiring this building. She laughed. The kind of laugh you give to someone you think is joking, but hope isn't serious. That's adorable, she said. No, I said, still smiling. What's adorable is thinking I don't already have 2 lawyers and an offer in escrow. Her mouth closed. Fast. That evening, she called Amelia. I know this because Amelia called me in a panic. Mom, what is going on? Jenna said you're trying to buy the care home? I'm not trying, I said. I am. But why? We sent you there to rest. You sent me there to vanish, I snapped. And I don't rest in cages, Amelia. I renovate them. She was quiet, so I continued. You brought me here like I was a chore to be managed. But what you didn't realize is, when you give a woman nothing to lose, she becomes very dangerous. By the end of the week, the offer was accepted. I signed the paperwork in Monica's office with a cup of black coffee and a pen that had Own Your Legacy engraved on the barrel. I bought the building for $610,000, cash. And just like that, Golden Crest wasn't theirs anymore, it was mine. The next morning, I returned to room 2B as usual. Same breakfast, same staff. Until Jenna stormed in, face pale. I just received notice you bought the building. I set down my spoon. You should get some rest, I said calmly. This place will be under new management very soon. She stared at me, lips parted, like I was a ghost that refused to stay dead. You can't just walk in and change everything. No, I said, rising slowly. But I can walk in and own it, starting now. I turned to the dining room full of residents and cleared my throat. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my name is Ruth Taylor. As of today, I am no longer your roommate. I'm your landlord. Gasps. A few laughs. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then the whole room erupted because they'd all been waiting for someone to say what they were too tired to scream. This place deserved better. And so did we. I called the meeting for 9 a.m. sharp on Monday. The staff thought it was a routine compliance check. What they didn't know was that by the time they walked into the dining room, they were sitting in a building I legally owned, and that their time clock was now mine to manage. I stood at the front with my notebook in hand, wearing the same cardigan they'd seen me nap in a dozen times. Familiarity, I'd learned, makes people underestimate you. And underestimation? That's a delicious weapon when used wisely. "Good morning," I said, once they'd all quieted down. "First of all, thank you for coming. I know Mondays are rough." A few nervous chuckles. Jenna sat near the back, arms folded tight, her lips pinched like she'd swallowed vinegar. "Some of you may have heard rumors," I continued. "Let me confirm one thing. Yes, as of last Friday, I became the legal owner of Golden Crest." Murmurs. Shocked glances. "I'm sure you have questions," I added, "but for now, I have one for you. How many of you would be proud to bring your own mother here?" Silence. Not a hand raised. Not a single nod. "That," I said, "is why things are going to change." I laid out 3 pieces of paper. One was the meal schedule. One was the staff to resident ratio. And the third? A photo of room 3D. The one with peeling paint, expired meds, and a cracked emergency button no one had noticed or reported. I know what's going on here. The corner cutting, the understaffing, the half-warm meals, and the 3-minute showers passed off as dignity. Jenna stood up. "With respect, you have no experience running a care facility." "No," I said, "but I have plenty of experience living in one." The staff shifted in their seats. A few looked ashamed. Some looked furious. But most, they looked relieved, like someone had finally said what they couldn't. "I'm not here to shame anyone," I said, "but I am here to start over, and that begins with choice." I reached into my bag and held up 2 stacks of envelopes. Stack 1, severance packages, full pay for 2 weeks and a positive reference letter. No hard feelings, no public drama. Jenna's jaw dropped. Stack 2, offer letters, for those who want to stay under new expectations, new ethics, and with a raise. Because I don't want cheap labor, I want people who care. Half the room froze, the other half leaned forward. "I'll give you an hour to decide," Eden, I said. "But after that, we begin renovation." When the meeting ended, I sat in the lobby sipping lukewarm tea from a paper cup, watching the staff trickle out with quiet decisions written on their faces. By the time my watch hit 10 a.m., 9 had taken the offer to leave. 4 asked if they could sleep on it. And 6 stayed. One nurse, Angela, came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I've wanted to report this place for years," she whispered. "But I needed the paycheck. You just gave me a way to help, without losing myself." I reached out, held her hand. "You just got promoted," I said. "Head of quality care." Jenna left without speaking to me. Fine by me. I kept her severance envelope sealed, but I wrote one sentence on the back. "The next time you put someone in a room to disappear, remember? Some of us bring lawyers." The next 2 weeks were a storm of motion. Painters came in. Electricians rewired the flickering halls. We swapped plastic chairs for armchairs with floral cushions. The vending machines, replaced with a tea cart and fruit baskets. I replaced the broken community room TV with a bookshelf and donated 200 books from my own home. And every night, I wrote handwritten notes to each resident. "This is still your home, but now it has a heart again." Word spread fast. Local news ran a story titled, "Woman put out to pasture, buys the farm, then replants it." Comments flooded in. Seniors wrote letters from other facilities asking how to move in. Children wrote, saying they finally understood the difference between warehousing someone and honoring them. And my daughter, she called me. "Mom," Amelia said, voice brittle. "I saw the article. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I replied, "but now you do." "I'm sorry." "No," I said, "you're late." "But you're not unwelcome." She asked if she could visit. I said yes. Because the new Golden Crest wasn't just about healing residents. It was about healing relationships. When she arrived, she brought Ella, my youngest granddaughter, in tow. They walked through the freshly painted front doors, greeted by the smell of lavender, the sound of classical music, and the soft clatter of teacups, not wheelchairs. Ella looked around and whispered, "This doesn't feel like a nursing home." I bent down and kissed her cheek. "That's because it isn't," I said. "Not anymore." 2 months after I bought Golden Crest, the building no longer smelled like canned peas and bleach. It smelled like cinnamon scones and fresh flowers. We had music on Thursdays, storytelling on Saturdays, and spa days every other Tuesday. Nail files, warm cloths, the whole works. Residents began wearing lipstick again. Some even asked for mirrors in the dining room. The staff started smiling more, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. There were fewer falls, fewer complaints, and a lot more laughter. We weren't a facility anymore. We were a community. One afternoon, Angela, our new head of care, found me in the courtyard, tending to the herb garden we'd planted. "Ruth," she said, "we've got the mayor's office on the line." I wiped my hands on my apron and followed her inside. Turned out someone on the city council had a grandmother here once. They'd seen the article. And they wanted to host an event at Golden Crest to showcase transformational elder care. I said yes, but I had a condition. I'd write the guest list. A week later, we sent out the invitations. Hand-delivered, tied with ribbon. No digital RSVPs, no cold emails. This was going to be personal. Amelia got one. So did Tim. And not just them. I invited the entire planning board that ignored past complaints, the state inspector who passed the facility with a wink, 3 local realtors who helped cover up the previous owner's negligence, and Jenna, the former administrator, who I knew still lived in town pretending she hadn't once told me to sit tight and stop asking so many questions. We called the event Open Doors, Open Eyes. Inside the front lobby, I hung 2 photos side by side, one of Golden Crest before and one of now. No captions, just contrast. That was all we needed. The day of the event, the place glowed. Fresh orchids on the tables, jazz trio near the fireplace, staff in lavender uniforms with gold pins that read, "Dignity First." I stood at the podium, welcomed the crowd, and told the truth. Not the sanitized version, but the version with bruised pride and silent betrayal. "I was brought here to rest," I said. But when people say rest, they often mean stop being seen. What they didn't realize was that I never stopped watching. A murmur rolled through the crowd. I continued. "You can't fix a system from the outside when it's designed to muffle your voice." So, I bought the building, and I gave everyone inside the one thing they hadn't been given in years: agency. After the speech, people walked around stunned. One of the council members whispered to another, "Why does this look better than my condo?" The former inspector approached me and tried to make nice. "We never had the funding to recommend repairs," he said. "You understand how red tape works?" I raised an eyebrow. "No," I said, "but I understand how excuses work." "And you've been making them for a decade." He walked away without another word. Good. Then came Jenna. She stood outside the front gate for a while, unsure if she could enter. I saw her, and I waved her in. She walked slowly, as if the air felt different, because it was. This place no longer bent to people like her. Now it stood on the strength of those it once overlooked. "I have to admit," she said, "I didn't think you'd actually change anything." "No," I said, "you didn't think I would. And that's why you failed." She looked around. "It's beautiful." "It's functional," I corrected. "The beauty is just a side effect of finally caring." She sighed. "I've applied for work again." "I didn't ask where," she continued. "I didn't come to ask for a job. I just wanted to see it." I looked at her and said the most honest thing I could. "Then I hope you leave here today knowing exactly what you lost." The guests toured the new rooms, saw the memory walls we built for residents with dementia, watched old women paint watercolors under the sun, heard laughter from the converted library-turned-piano room. Golden Crest had become a sanctuary, not for the dying, but for the living. After everyone left, Amelia came and found me in the kitchen, wiping down a counter. She held Ella on her hip, now almost walking, cheeks red from the excitement. "You did this," she said softly. No, I said. I just reminded everyone what should have been done in the first place. She nodded. I still feel awful for how we handled things. I know, I said. But guilt doesn't rebuild trust. Actions do. She placed Ella in my arms, and for the first time, my granddaughter leaned her head on my shoulder, quiet and safe. Not like I was a visitor, but like I was home. That night, I sat alone in my room, now renovated, now chosen, and wrote one final line in my journal. They brought me here to rest. I came back to rise. And now I offer that rise to everyone else, still waiting to be seen. Her name was Loretta, 86 years old, snow white curls, fingers always folded neatly in her lap like she was waiting for a prayer to land. When I first arrived at Golden Crest, she'd already been here for 2 years. Room 1C, private. She never spoke. Not a word. Not to the nurses, not to other residents. Not even when they sang Happy Birthday last March and gave her a cupcake with her name spelled wrong on the wrapper. I'd seen her in the hallway, always quiet, always watching, like a ghost still deciding whether she wanted to stay. Angela told me one morning over coffee, Loretta used to be a music teacher. Her son put her here when she started forgetting her way home. Does she remember him? I asked. Number. But she remembers the piano. That gave me an idea. The next week, we moved the old upright piano out of storage and into the center of the library. We hired a local student named Dahlia to come in every Friday to play, not just classical pieces, but songs with memory. Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, even a little Motown for the younger ones. By the second week, Loretta came into the room. By the third, she sat right next to the piano, still silent. But her fingers tapped. Every note, every beat, as if her body remembered what her mind had lost. I started sitting with her during those sessions. Never forced conversation, just kept her company. We didn't need words. Sometimes presence is more powerful than platitudes. Then one afternoon, in the middle of Moon River, she turned to me and said, clear as day, that was my wedding song. The room went quiet. Even Dahlia paused. I turned to her, trying not to startle the moment. It's a beautiful one, I whispered. She nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. My Jimmy had 2 left feet, but he danced like he was Fred Astaire that night. Angela heard from the hallway and came rushing in with her mouth open. She spoke? Loretta nodded and patted my hand. Your place is warm, she said. Not just the air. The air is still cold. But this part, she tapped her chest. This is warm again. We sat there for another hour talking about Jimmy, their old music classroom, and how she once slapped a student's knuckles with a ruler for playing chopsticks too many times in 1 week. She laughed at her own memory, and for a moment, so did I. Later that night, I added a new page to my journal. Loretta came back today, not because we gave her a miracle, but because we gave her a melody. People think you lose yourself when your mind slips, but sometimes all it takes is one song to bring you home. After that, Loretta became our unofficial music supervisor. She helped Dahlia pick the next week's playlist. Sometimes she even hummed along. On rare days, she sang, soft and shaky, but still beautiful. Residents started gathering early to watch. Staff stayed after their shift to listen. And every time she spoke, the room got a little brighter. The transformation of Golden Crest wasn't just about paint and pillows. It was about moments like that. Moments where someone who'd been dismissed, tucked away, or forgotten found their voice again. And I realized something that day. They didn't send me to this home to rest. They sent me here to disappear. But instead, I lit a match and turned every dark corner into a spotlight. A week later, I asked Loretta if she wanted to play something herself. Her eyes widened. I don't know if I remember the keys. You don't need to, I told her. Just remember the feeling. She sat at the piano with trembling hands. Dahlia helped her place them. Then, slowly, brokenly, beautifully, she began to play. A few missed notes. But she laughed through them, and the rest of us cried. Because it was more than music. It was proof. You are never too far gone to return to yourself. After the performance, she stood on her own and bowed. Everyone clapped. She turned to me and said, "You gave me a second chance at a final chapter." I hugged her and whispered, "No, Loretta, you wrote this chapter yourself. I just gave you the piano. It came in a white envelope. No return address, just my full name in the center, typed. No handwritten flourish, no mom, no grandma, not even a Mrs. That's how you know you're not being spoken to. You're being informed." I opened it at my desk at Golden Crest beside a stack of fresh renovation invoices and a thank you card from a resident's daughter who said her mother hadn't smiled in 6 months. Until last week. Inside the envelope was a single-page letter from Amelia, cold, blunt, and in some twisted way, rehearsed. Effective immediately, and upon advice of counsel, we've decided to remove your name from the Taylor Family Living Trust for the purposes of simplification. This is not personal, it's administrative. Thank you for understanding. Not personal. They always say that when they want to hurt you without taking credit for the bruise. I read the letter 3 times. Then I laughed, a full, unfiltered belly laugh. Angela walked in and saw me. "Everything all right?" I handed her the letter. She read it. Slowly, then looked at me, stunned. "They removed you from your own family's legacy?" I nodded. She waited for me to break down. But I didn't, because how do you break something already carved from stone? "I guess they thought the inheritance was a leash," I said quietly. "And when I slipped it, they panicked." Angela leaned on the desk. "You okay?" "Oh," I said, folding the letter neatly. "I'm more than okay. I finally know where I stand. And now?" I slid the letter into the shredder beside the desk. Now I stopped trying to be invited to their table. Because I've already built my own. That evening I went through my files. The financials for Golden Crest, the grant applications, the donation records. We'd become solvent, thriving actually. More than a dozen families on a wait list. New programs launching. The town had even named us Most Improved Facility of the Year. And me, I'd earned more respect in 5 months than I had in the last 5 years of family birthdays and politely filtered small talk. Funny, isn't it? The things they called extra work became my empire. Later that week, Amelia called. I let it go to voicemail. She tried again, then texted. "Saw that article about Loretta's piano story? Beautiful. Also, wanted to talk about the letter. Please call." I didn't respond, because not every message deserves an audience. 2 days passed. Then she showed up, at the front gate, holding a pie. Of course she brought pie. Casserole on the way in, pie on the way out. She always thought butter and sugar were apology enough. Angela buzzed my office. "She's here. You want me to send her in?" I thought for a moment, then said, "No. Have her wait in the tea room. I'll come to her." When I walked in, Amelia stood and smiled like nothing had happened. "Mom, hi. You look amazing. This place is..." She looked around at the fresh flowers, the soft jazz, the residents playing cards in the sunlit window nook. "This place is incredible." I sat across from her, waited. She fidgeted with the edge of her napkin. I didn't mean anything personal by that letter. I raised an eyebrow. "You removed me from the trust, Amelia." Her face twisted with guilt. "I thought you'd be taken care of. I didn't realize." "No," I cut in. "You did realize. You just assumed I wouldn't fight back. That I'd accept my exile with grace like a good old woman. You forgot who raised you." She looked down. "I didn't want things to get messy." "Family is messy," I said. "And removing me from the paperwork doesn't remove me from the bloodline." She started to cry. Tears sliding quietly. No sobbing, just shame. "Good. That's where truth begins." She whispered, "I thought you were fading. Like Dad did. I got scared." "And so you pushed me out?" I didn't know how to help. I leaned forward. "You don't help someone by locking them away from their purpose. You help by asking what they need." She nodded. "I know that now." There it was. Growth, not redemption, but roots. She opened her purse and pulled out a new letter from the family lawyer. It's not legal yet, she said, but I want you to see it. I'm putting you back in the trust. Not because you need it, because I need to show you that I see what you've built. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I stood. You can leave that here, I said. And if you want me in your life, it won't be as an heir. It'll be as a woman whose name you say before the money's discussed. She nodded slowly, then looked at the wall, at the photo of Loretta, mid-laugh at the piano. I wish Ella could grow up here. I smiled. She can, because you're not too late. You're just on time to choose a better legacy. That night, I wrote one sentence in my journal. They tried to erase me from the future, but I built a present so powerful, they had to come knocking at my door. It was a bright morning in late October when the envelope arrived. Gold-trimmed, heavy, official. Angela brought it to my office, holding it like it might be fragile. It's from City Hall, she said, eyes wide. I took it slowly, already guessing what it was. Not because I expected recognition, but because when you lift others for long enough, someone eventually looks up and realizes you're the one holding the weight. Inside was an invitation. You are cordially invited to receive the City of Bellwood's Community Excellence Award for Transformational Leadership in Elder Care. Ceremony, Friday at 6 p.m. Location, Town Hall Courtyard. Dress code, formal. Guests encouraged. The mayor himself had signed it, not a stamp, an actual signature. Angela squealed when she read it. You're going to need a dress. I smirked. Not just a dress, a statement. The next afternoon, we went shopping. The boutique owner tried to steer me toward elegant, matronly classics. Taupes, blues, florals. I picked out a fitted cranberry red dress with a neckline that said, "This woman didn't come here to be tucked behind a podium." Angela clapped. You look like a woman who built a kingdom from rubble. Good, I said, because I did. The ceremony was packed. Rows of chairs, cameras, local reporters, even some of the very council members who once ignored our calls. Loretta was there too, wearing a silk scarf and beaming like she'd just landed on Broadway. One of the younger residents, Thomas, a Vietnam vet who never stopped wearing his baseball cap, brought flowers, in case you win a second award. I tucked them into my arm like a scepter. When the mayor took the stage, he spoke of renewal, resilience, and a woman who turned institutional indifference into a sanctuary of dignity. He called me a force. Then he handed me the plaque. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because I was standing tall, whole, on the very ground they once thought would be my final chapter. I stepped to the mic, and I spoke. 5 months ago, I was dropped off like a suitcase. They told me to rest. But rest isn't the same as being silenced. And silence is not what women like us were born to carry. The crowd leaned in, so I continued. I didn't renovate this place because I was angry. I renovated it because I remembered who I was. And more importantly, who we are. We are not burdens. We are blueprints. Our lives built the ground every generation walks on. And from now on, we won't apologize for asking for more than beige walls and cold tea. People stood, applauded. Some wiped their eyes. And I just bowed. Once. Gracefully. After the ceremony, as the crowd thinned and reporters packed up, a woman approached me. Gray coat. Quiet eyes. Hands trembling around a yellowed envelope. I'm sorry to intrude, she said, but I think this belongs to you. I took the envelope. There was no name on the outside, but when I opened it, my breath caught. Inside was a letter. In Alan's handwriting, my late husband. The woman explained. My father was the estate attorney you and your husband used. When he passed, I found this letter in one of his safety files. It was marked, "For Ruth if anything ever happens." I thought maybe it was too late. But after tonight, I had to find you. I nodded, speechless. She left me alone with it. I sat down on a bench under a street lamp and unfolded the letter with shaking hands. It read, My dearest Ruth, if you're reading this, it means I've left you behind, but only in body. You've always been stronger than you let on. And one day, you'll face a moment where people forget just how powerful you are. When that happens, I need you to remember you are not finished. You are not fading. You are fire wrapped in velvet. And if they try to lock you away, you burn the whole damn cage down and build a palace. I love you. Now and always. Alan. I held that letter like it was oxygen. My breath came slow, but my heart, it thundered. Because somehow Alan had known. He'd known that I'd be underestimated, dismissed, and that I'd rise anyway. Later that night, I placed the letter in a frame beside my Community Excellence Award. Not because I needed validation, but because sometimes a woman needs a reminder. Not only did she survive, she built something sacred in the ruins. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Angela and I were sipping chamomile in the staff lounge, reviewing the schedule for our fall festival. We'd planned pumpkin carving, apple cider, and, at Loretta's request, a costume contest with a glamorous ghosts theme. My phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. I answered. The voice on the other end was polished, professional, and trembling just enough to reveal nerves. Mrs. Taylor, my name is Alex Morrison. I'm with the state's Elder Care Licensing Board. I've been following your work at Golden Crest. I leaned back in my chair. Is this about another inspection? I asked, smiling. No, he said. This is about a proposition. One that's a little bigger. I listened quietly as he explained. Turns out word of Golden Crest's transformation had spread beyond the city. 3 separate care homes in the region had recently failed audits. 2 were under review for neglect. 1 had just lost its director. He paused, then said, We'd like you to consider overseeing them. Not just as a consultant, as the executive partner in a restructured chain. Angela gasped when I told her. You'd be in charge of all of them, she said, nearly spilling her tea. I nodded. And they'd pay you to fix what they let rot. I nodded again, then added, They want me to visit the properties next week. See if I'm a fit. Angela looked at me like I'd just told her I was running for president. You're going to do it, right? I took a long breath, then said, I'm not sure. That night, I walked the halls of Golden Crest. Room to room. Loretta was asleep with a knit cap pulled down over her eyes, a note on her nightstand that read, Wake me for piano or peach cobbler, nothing else. Thomas had hung a sign on his door that said, Quiet. Vet dreaming of Vegas. And little Ella, my granddaughter, not the resident, had drawn a crayon picture of the building, labeled in wobbly kid writing, Gamma's Castle. I smiled, and I cried, because I wasn't sure if I could multiply what we'd built here without breaking the magic of it. The next morning, Amelia met me at the breakfast table. She poured the tea now like she was trying to rewrite time. Whatever you decide, she said softly, we're with you. I looked at her, older now in her eyes than she'd ever let herself be before. You know, I said, you once removed me from the family trust. She winced. I remember. And now, I said, you're trusting me to rebuild a legacy bigger than anything you imagined. She reached across the table, held my hand. I never knew what real legacy looked like. She whispered, now I do. I visited the other facilities. One had mildew in the vents. Another used bed rails like prison bars. The third had a TV blaring all day with no one watching, just flickering noise in a room full of forgotten names. But in each place, I saw possibility. A cracked ceiling could be replaced. So could a cracked culture. At the final stop, an aide approached me, young, tired, but hopeful. Are you really the woman from Golden Crest? I am. She smiled, eyes damp. My grandma used to say, we need women who show up with lipstick and war plans. I think she meant you. I laughed, and right then, I knew. The next week, I signed the agreement. Not just to consult, to lead. The chain would be rebranded under a new name. Inspired by something Loretta once said as she played the piano, this place feels warm again. We called it the Warmth Collective. I returned to Golden Crest with a binder full of plans and a spark I hadn't felt since the day I took my first step back into room 2B. Angela raised a toast at our weekly staff dinner. To Ruth, she said, holding her glass high. Who proved you can outgrow the grave they try to write you into? We all cheered, but I added, no to all of us. Who made the grave into a garden? In the weeks that followed, I began training new directors, teaching them that elder care wasn't just about safety rails and diet plans. It was about dignity, about presence, about the idea that our final chapters could be our boldest. Amelia joined the board. Brandon offered to oversee logistics. And Ella, she started bringing drawings every weekend, each one more detailed than the last. On one, she'd drawn a heart around Golden Crest and written, "Home of Brave Old People." I kept that one on my desk, right next to Alan's letter. The day we hung the new sign outside Golden Crest, a warmth collective home, residents gathered out front. Loretta stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she said. "No," I said. "We did." That night, I stood in the quiet hallway and whispered to the building, "You were supposed to be my end, but you became my beginning." Then I went to bed, not to rest, but to dream bigger.